Have you ever wondered about Ishmael, the often overlooked son of Abraham and Hagar, and his role in shaping the course of history? Ishmael's life is a story of rejection and redemption, struggle and survival. In this video, we'll uncover the fascinating journey of Ishmael, his legacy as the founder of the Ishmaelite people, and how his story still impacts the world today. As we explore Ishmael's life, you'll discover powerful lessons about God's faithfulness, his plans for those who feel abandoned, and his ability to transform even the most difficult circumstances. This story will challenge you to see how God can bring purpose out of pain and fulfill his promises in ways we might not expect. It's a journey of hope and spiritual insight you won't want to miss. If you're ready to dive into this extraordinary story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. By doing so, you'll help share this powerful message with others who need to hear it. Let's begin Ishmael's incredible story together. The story of Ishmael begins with God's covenant with Abraham. In Genesis 17 verses 4-5, God promises Abraham that he will be the father of many nations. This is a significant moment, as God establishes a covenant with Abraham, assuring him that his descendants will be numerous. Abraham, at this time, is already quite old, and his wife Sarai, who later becomes Sarah, has been unable to bear him children. Despite this, God assures Abraham that his offspring will be as many as the stars in the sky. This promise creates anticipation, but also uncertainty, as the couple faces the challenge of having a child in their old age. As time passes, Sarah becomes impatient with the delay in God's promise. In Genesis 16, Sarah suggests to Abraham that he have a child with Hagar, her maidservant. Sarah feels that she is too old to conceive and believes that through Hagar, God's promise can still be fulfilled. This suggestion was in line with the customs of the time, where a servant or maid could bear a child for the family if the wife was unable to have children. Although Abraham initially hesitates, he ultimately agrees to Sarah's plan, and Hagar becomes pregnant with his child. When Hagar becomes pregnant, tension begins to build within Abraham's household. Sarah's decision leads to an uncomfortable situation, as Hagar begins to look down on Sarah, now that she is carrying Abraham's child. Sarah, in turn, becomes upset with Hagar's behavior, feeling betrayed and disrespected. The situation creates conflict between the two women, and Sarah, feeling powerless, turns to Abraham for help. Abraham, although not without blame, tells Sarah that it is her servant, and she may deal with her as she sees fit. This conflict sets the stage for the birth of Ishmael and its lasting impact on the family. Ishmael's birth represents a pivotal moment in the story of Abraham and Sarah. Despite the tension and complications surrounding his conception, Ishmael is born, and Abraham loves him as his son. However, this moment of joy is tempered by the ongoing conflict between Sarah and Hagar, which remains unresolved. This tension between Sarah and Hagar, and the uncertainty surrounding the child's future, would continue to shape the family dynamic and play a crucial role in the unfolding story of Abraham's descendants. In the broader narrative of Abraham's family, Ishmael's birth also highlights the challenges of waiting for God's promises to be fulfilled. While Abraham and Sarah's actions were motivated by a desire to help God's plan along, their decision ultimately led to a child born under difficult circumstances. God's timing, however, would soon show that his promises would be fulfilled in ways far beyond human expectations. Ishmael's birth, while important, was only the beginning of a larger story that would involve God's faithfulness to both Isaac and Ishmael and the future of their respective nations. The birth of Ishmael also serves as a reminder of the complex human emotions and choices that shape our lives. The tension between Sarah and Hagar and the resulting birth of Ishmael is a story of human desire, impatience, and faith. Although Abraham and Sarah's actions were not in line with God's ideal plan, they did not alter God's ultimate purpose. This aspect of the story teaches us about the reality of human imperfections, the complexity of relationships, and the assurance that, even in moments of struggle, God's plan remains intact. When Isaac was born to Sarah and Abraham, the dynamics within their family changed dramatically. Isaac was the long-awaited son promised by God, and his birth fulfilled God's covenant with Abraham. However, the arrival of Isaac caused tension between him and Ishmael, his half-brother. Isaac's birth symbolized the fulfillment of God's promise, but for Ishmael, it was a reminder of his different status within the family. The rivalry between Isaac and Ishmael reached a breaking point, particularly when Sarah saw Ishmael mocking Isaac. In Genesis 21 verses 9 to 10, Sarah asks Abraham to send Hagar and Ishmael away, feeling that the presence of Ishmael would no longer be compatible with the inheritance of Isaac. This moment highlights the deepening conflict between the two sons. The expulsion of Hagar and Ishmael is one of the most emotional moments in the story. Abraham, although deeply conflicted about sending his son away, obeyed God's instruction. In Genesis 21 verse 14, we read that Abraham gave Hagar bread and water and sent her and Ishmael into the wilderness. As they wandered in the desert, Hagar became desperate, and when the water ran out, she placed Ishmael under a bush, not wanting to watch him die. This moment captures the intense emotional hardship that Hagar and Ishmael endured as they were cast out from Abraham's household. In the midst of their despair, God showed Hagar and Ishmael great compassion. God spoke to Hagar from heaven, telling her not to be afraid and reassuring her that Ishmael would not die. God promised that he would make Ishmael a great nation, giving him a future despite the circumstances of his expulsion. In Genesis 21 verses 17 to 18, God opens Hagar's eyes to a well of water, and she was able to save her son. This moment marks the beginning of God's fulfillment of his promise to Ishmael, showing his care for him, even though he was no longer part of Abraham's household. The significance of the promise to Ishmael is profound. Despite the tension and hardship, God assured Hagar that Ishmael would be the father of a great nation. This promise was not just a reassurance in a moment of crisis, but also a long-term commitment from God to Ishmael's descendants. Ishmael would become the ancestor of the Ishmaelites, a people who would later have an important place in history, particularly in the Arabian Peninsula. God's faithfulness to his promise to Ishmael underscores that God's plans are not limited by human decisions and that he is capable of fulfilling his purposes despite adversity. As Ishmael grew, he went on to have 12 sons, who became the leaders of 12 tribes. This growth into a powerful and numerous people showed the fulfillment of God's promise. Ishmael's descendants became a significant part of the biblical narrative, with their influence spread throughout the region, particularly in the areas surrounding Israel. Ishmael's life serves as a reminder that God's promises are not only about the immediate family but extend far beyond, impacting future generations in ways that are sometimes unexpected. Ishmael's story is not only one of hardship and exile, but also one of God's unshakable faithfulness. The conflict between Isaac and Ishmael, and the eventual expulsion of Ishmael, could have led to a life of obscurity. However, God's intervention and promise to make him a great nation ensured that Ishmael's legacy would continue to shape history. This aspect of the story teaches us about the power of God's promises and how he can work through any situation to bring about his plans, even when it seems like everything is falling apart. Ishmael's descendants became a significant group of people in the ancient world. As God promised, Ishmael's family grew into a large and powerful nation. They were primarily nomadic, living in the desert regions of the Arabian Peninsula. The Ishmaelites formed various tribes that spread across the region, becoming known for their skills in herding and trading. Over time, they developed their own cultural identity, distinct from other nations, but with deep connections to the broader Middle Eastern world. Their nomadic lifestyle and ability to navigate harsh environments allowed them to flourish in a land where many other tribes struggled to survive. The Ishmaelites played an important role in the biblical narrative, especially in relation to Israel. One of the most notable stories involving the Ishmaelites is the account of Joseph being sold by his brothers. In Genesis 37 verse 28, Joseph's brothers, jealous of him, sold him into slavery to a group of Ishmaelite traders heading to Egypt. This act, though born from envy, set in motion a series of events that would eventually lead to Joseph becoming a powerful figure in Egypt, saving his family during a time of famine. The Ishmaelites were involved in this trade, showcasing their influence in commerce and their connections to key events in biblical history. In addition to their role in the story of Joseph, the Ishmaelites were also known for their participation in trade, particularly in goods such as spices, textiles, and other valuable commodities. Their caravans traveled extensively through the desert, connecting various regions of the ancient world. This trade network not only made the Ishmaelites a prosperous people but also allowed them to influence the surrounding nations. They were an integral part of the economy and culture of the ancient Near East, with their commercial activities bridging different civilizations. The legacy of Ishmael's descendants extends far beyond the biblical stories. Historically, the Ishmaelites are often considered the ancestors of the Arab nations, and their influence is still felt today. Over the centuries, their descendants became intertwined with the rise of Islam and the Arab world, which traces its spiritual heritage back to Ishmael through his son, Kedar, and ultimately through the Prophet Muhammad. The historical connection between the Ishmaelites and the Arab people is a key part of the religious and cultural fabric of the modern Middle East. Ishmael's legacy in world history is significant, particularly in the Arab world. The descendants of Ishmael have been influential in the development of various nations, not only in the Middle East but across North Africa and beyond. The cultural, religious, and political impact of the Arab nations has shaped global history in numerous ways, from the spread of Islam to their contributions in fields such as science, philosophy, and trade. This legacy is deeply connected to the story of Ishmael, who, despite his early struggles, became the forefather of a great nation. The impact of Ishmael's lineage serves as a reminder of the enduring nature of God's promises. Though Ishmael was not the child of promise through whom the covenant with Israel would be fulfilled, God's plan for him was just as significant. His descendants went on to have a profound impact on the course of history, with the Arab nations playing a pivotal role in the development of civilizations across the world. Ishmael's story reminds us that God's promises reach beyond our expectations and that He can use anyone, regardless of their background, to fulfill His divine purpose. Ishmael's story teaches us an important lesson about God's promises. They are fulfilled in ways we might not expect, but they are always carried out according to God's perfect timing. While God's covenant with Abraham was intended to pass through Isaac, His promise to Ishmael was equally significant. Despite the challenges Ishmael faced, including being cast out into the desert, God's promise to make him the father of a great nation came to pass. This reminds us that God's plans may not always align with our expectations, but He is faithful to fulfill His word in His time and in His way, even when we can't see the full picture. The story of Ishmael also highlights the power of persistence. Ishmael, along with his mother Hagar, faced numerous challenges throughout his life, from being sent away by Abraham to living in the wilderness. Despite these hardships, Ishmael survived and thrived, and his descendants became a powerful people. This teaches us the value of perseverance, especially when faced with adversity. No matter how difficult life may seem, God's promises remain true, and like Ishmael, we can overcome challenges with faith and persistence, knowing that God has a plan for us. Ishmael's life also speaks to the importance of reconciliation and addressing family tensions. His relationship with Isaac, his half-brother, was marked by conflict, particularly after Isaac's birth and the tension it caused within Abraham's family. Despite the initial discord, God continued to bless both Isaac and Ishmael. This offers a powerful message about the potential for reconciliation, even in the most difficult family situations. It reminds us that while family dynamics can be complicated, God's grace has the power to heal relationships and bring peace where there is division. Moreover, Ishmael's story teaches us that God's grace can provide hope in difficult circumstances. Hagar, Ishmael's mother, was an outcast who faced great hardship when she was sent away with her son. But God showed her compassion, providing for them in the desert and reaffirming His promise to her son. This act of grace reminds us that no matter how dire our situation may seem, God's care for us never falters. His grace is sufficient, and His presence is with us even in our darkest moments. Ishmael's perseverance, despite his challenges, serves as a model for us today. His life encourages us to keep moving forward, trusting that God's promises will be fulfilled, even if the journey is long or difficult. It's a reminder that we are not alone in our struggles. God is with us, providing strength and guidance as we navigate life's trials. Just as Ishmael was not abandoned, we too can trust that God will see us through, and that His plans for us are greater than we can imagine. Finally, Ishmael's legacy reminds us of the importance of looking beyond our immediate circumstances. His story is not just about one man but about a lineage that would shape nations. The nations descended from Ishmael have made a lasting impact on world history, demonstrating that God's plans can extend far beyond our understanding. It's a reminder that our actions, our faith, and our obedience can have a lasting impact, not only on our lives but on the lives of generations to come. Ishmael's story teaches us to trust in God's greater plan and to be faithful in the roles He has called us to play. To conclude, Ishmael's story is one of struggle, redemption, and promise. From his birth, his journey was marked by complex relationships, particularly with his half-brother Isaac, and the challenges faced by his mother, Hagar. Despite the difficulties and tensions within his family, Ishmael grew into the father of the Ishmaelite people, a lineage that would influence many nations. His life shows how God's promises are not only fulfilled in expected ways but can unfold in unexpected and remarkable ways. The story of Ishmael teaches us about God's faithfulness. Even when we face adversity or feel overlooked, God's promises remain true. Ishmael's life is a reminder that God's plans for us are bigger than the struggles we face in the present. He was never abandoned by God, and despite the challenges, he was promised to become a great nation, just as God had said. His story challenges us to trust that, even when the path is unclear or difficult, God is with us, fulfilling His promises in ways we may not understand. Ishmael's journey also teaches us the importance of patience and trust. He didn't see immediate results or clear blessings at the start, but over time, God's promise was revealed through his descendants. Similarly, we may not always see the outcome of our faith and trust in God immediately, but we are called to remain faithful, trusting that God's plan will unfold in its perfect timing. As we reflect on Ishmael's life, we are reminded that God's faithfulness transcends generations. Ishmael's story is not just about one person, but about the lasting impact of God's promises on entire nations. This serves as a reminder that our actions, even when we may not fully see their significance, can have far-reaching effects. Just as Ishmael's legacy continues to this day, so too does the power of God's faithfulness and His ongoing work in our lives and the world. We can also draw lessons from Ishmael's story about overcoming conflict and division. The relationship between Ishmael and Isaac was fraught with tension, but God still worked through both of their lives to fulfill His promises. This reminds us that even in times of conflict, God's purposes will prevail. We are encouraged to trust in God's ability to bring resolution, peace, and fulfillment of His promises, even when our circumstances seem challenging. In closing, let's reflect on the powerful promise given to Hagar and Ishmael in Genesis 21 verse 18. "Lift up the boy and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." This verse beautifully encapsulates God's unwavering faithfulness. It reminds us that no matter what struggles we face, God's plans for us are secure. His promises are not hindered by our circumstances, but are certain and steadfast, calling us to trust and believe in His ability to fulfill what He has spoken over our lives.